2006, I came back to my hometown of Philadelphia to launch the Center for High Impact Philanthropy. And ever since then, I feel more and more like that character in M. Night Shyamalan's movie Sixth Sense. You know, the boy who confides in his child psychologist that his problem is, I see dead people. And he says it in that whisper because he knows it's pretty weird, and he knows that other people don't see them. Only in my case, I see philanthropists. And I see them everywhere. And I want to tell you why. You know, most people, when they hear the word philanthropy, they think of the big foundations, Rockefeller, Gates, Pew. But those foundations are less than 20% of philanthropic giving. The vast majority of philanthropy is done by individuals. And over 80% of US households give to charity. So if you look at the person sitting next to you, you're probably not sitting next to Bill Gates or a Rockefeller. But you're probably sitting next to someone who's made at least one philanthropic gift in the past year. Now, why do we give? We give for a lot of reasons. We give because somebody asks us. We give as a way to express our beliefs and values. Sometimes we give out of gratitude or social pressure. But sometimes we're moved to give because we want to make a difference. We want to create a social impact. Now, individuals like you and me don't have a staff of program officers to understand how we can create that impact we seek. But there's a team at the Center for High Impact Philanthropy that works every day to try to get great answers to this question. How can I, as a donor, with whatever money I have to spend, do the most good? Now, my hope is that by sharing just a few of the answers that the Center's team has found, you'll start seeing high-impact philanthropists everywhere. Now, by a quick show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of Scared Straight? Wow, a lot of people in the room. It's a simple concept. The idea is that you have a child who's misbehaving. You show them what's going to happen if they keep doing what they're doing. And by seeing that consequence, you scare them straight. Right? That's the idea. For those of us who have young kids, the intuitive appeal of this is clear. The nonprofit program Scared Straight was one way to answer that question, how can I do good? And in this case, what it was trying to do was reduce juvenile delinquency. And just like how I described the concept, the way it worked in the program is that you took young people who were at risk of juvenile delinquency, had been arrested or likely were going to be arrested, and you organized prison visits. They saw what prison life was really like, they talked to the inmates, and the idea was that that was so scary that they would stop doing what they were doing. It has been the subject of documentaries and TV shows. Millions of dollars have been spent to scale up this program in the US and in other countries. Testimonials from kids saying, this is what saved me. The problem is, it doesn't work. Randomized controlled trial studies, the kind that control for factors and make sure it's not that, well, the hardest to help kids were in the program and the well-behaved kids were in the control group. It controlled for that kind of thing and found that children in Scared Straight programs were up to 26% more likely to be arrested. Statistically, they would have been better off if you just left them alone. Now, by another quick show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of home visitation programs or one of its pioneers, the nonprofit Nurse Family Partnerships? Okay, fewer hands. Nurse Family Partnership also has an effect on juvenile delinquency. And this is the way this program works. You take a woman, a low-income woman, often isolated, pregnant with her first child. And a registered nurse visits her while she's still pregnant, makes sure she goes to her prenatal visits, plans for the arrival of the baby. Once the baby arrives, that nurse continues to visit up until that child is age 2. Helps with education and nutrition issues, helps mom so that she has ways to deal with some of the challenges of caring for a newborn, helps her plan for the future. And with the same kind of high-quality studies I just mentioned for Scared Straight, here are the results. Up to 59% decrease in arrests. The slide says up to age 15. That's only because that's how far out the study went. Decreases in other things we don't want to see. ER visits, child abuse, and dramatic increases in the things we do want to see. Increases in school attainment and workforce participation by both mom and child. This was such a good answer to how you can do good that for every $1 spent on this program, we as a society get $5 back. In lowered social welfare costs, yeah, that's worth a clap, and increased tax revenue because mom and child are productively contributing to the economy. Okay? So Scared Straight, far better known, intuitive concept, doesn't work. Nurse-family partnerships hasn't been the subject of an after-school special yet, but it does work. It's a high-impact philanthropic opportunity. Now, sometimes when we're looking for answers, when you are trying to do another kind of good, in this case, let's say, increase school attendance by 1 year, you'll find more than one great answer. For a lot of children around the world, just 1 more year of schooling can dramatically change the trajectory of their lives, particularly for girls in the developing world. One way you can make that happen is by providing a conditional cash transfer to that family. So what does this mean? The idea is that a family gets $1,000 on the condition that the child completes a year of schooling. Now, why does this work? Well, if you think of some of the families that are the beneficiaries of this program, say a small farmer, sending a child to school means 1 fewer set of hands to help during harvest or planting. It means no one to take care of younger siblings when mom and dad are out of the house. There's a real trade-off, an economic trade-off for these families between investing in the future of one child and making sure the family has enough to eat today. A conditional cash transfer means they don't have to make that trade-off. But there's another good answer. Uniform giveaways. So for the same good, increasing school attendance by 1 year, sometimes what works is providing a school uniform. And why would that be? Never underestimate the power of shame and the very human need we all have to belong. Now, for some of these children, the poorest children, they don't have enough. Their families don't have enough to pay for that uniform. But providing them that uniform means that they now have that powerful signal to their fellow classmates, to their teacher, to themselves, that they belong in this classroom with an important job to do, to learn. And that was enough to have them complete that year of school. And sometimes children in other parts of the world aren't in school for the same reason my son Zachary was home all week last week. My husband and I were doing what I refer to as the Motrin prayer, where exactly 6 hours after that last dose of Motrin, you put the thermometer in and you start going, please, 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 let it come down. Michael and I had no doubt that Zach would recover. We are not concerned that this illness is going to prevent him from finishing out the school year. But for some of the families I'm talking about, it's not a garden variety winter virus, it's parasitic worms, and they don't have the medicine to help their children get better. But a dosage of $3.50 is enough to have those children finish out the school year. Right? $3.50. You do not have to be a billionaire to practice high-impact philanthropy. Billionaires can practice high-input philanthropy. What I'm talking about is high-impact philanthropy, making the biggest difference you can with whatever money you have to spend. Now, there are other times where we discover that there are ways to be more impactful with something we may have been doing all along. And this is the case when it comes to providing emergency food. More and more families around the country are not sure where their next meal will come from. And if you're like me, one of the ways you might have helped is to donate to a canned food drive. And they help. And they can be a very visible way to show that we care and to remind us of the need in our own community. But one thing that I discovered when I started doing this work is that even something like a canned food drive that we're so used to seeing and participating in can be made more impactful. The way I've done it is I might take $10 and contribute, I don't know, something like this to my canned food drive. Right? A can of sardines, a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly. That's about what $10 can buy at retail. But if I gave that same $10 and made a financial contribution to our regional food bank, Philabundance here, that same $10 today can provide this much food. Enough to feed a family of 4 for almost a week. Right, it's kind of loaves and fishes. How does that happen? Well, here's how it happens. It turns out over the past few decades, our country has gotten so productive in producing food that we have a surplus. And food companies have a financial incentive to donate that. And there's a nonprofit called Feeding America that can receive all that surplus. And there are food banks around the country who can access that surplus and redistribute it. And because all that food's donated, and good food, I'm not talking about garbage, I'm talking about carrots that somehow got into the package with the label upside down so the retailer can't take it anymore. Our regional food banks can access that food, donated food, for 10 to 20 cents a pound, a small handling fee. And that's why we can provide more emergency food with a financial contribution. Now, I know some people said, yeah, but that's sort of apples to oranges, right? You're talking about writing a check, and writing a check is not the same thing as volunteering to organize a food drive. Food drives are a tradition, and it gets people engaged. And knowing what we know, I say, well, then if you want engagement, ask your local food bank, what are the foods that you have a really hard time sourcing from this surplus that you know families in this community need? I'll focus my food drive on those. Or like one church did where they had this tradition of children going up during offertory and providing the cans. You could see a beautiful picture. Instead, they walked up with empty cans and put a small donation inside. Same tradition, more impact. There is no reason we ever have to trade off engagement and tradition for making a meaningful difference. Now, I know not every penny we spend philanthropically is so focused on social impact. I give to my alma mater because I'm grateful. The way it shaped who I am, because I met some of my dearest friends there. I may give to support a buddy who's doing a fundraising race. Some of us belong to communities where we feel an obligation to contribute. So I get it. I still don't know if I've met anyone who has 100% pure high-impact philanthropy portfolio. But here's what I do know. Every fact, every story that I just shared with you is in the public domain. Somebody just had to ask. And there are more answers for free. If you go to the Center for High Impact Philanthropy's website, you'll find ways to provide effective disaster relief, reduce childhood obesity here in Philadelphia and elsewhere, make sure every child has a strong start in life, no matter where they're born. Those answers are there, and it's not just about the Center for High Impact Philanthropy, because the center is part of a growing ecosystem of organizations and individuals like analysts like John Barron, applied researchers like Chris Moore, journalists like Tina Rosenberg, who are working every day to make sure that these answers are more and more accessible to individuals, anybody who raises their hand and says, I'm in. Now, if you look at the person sitting next to you, not only are you probably sitting next to someone who made at least one philanthropic gift this year, you're sitting next to someone who can practice high-impact philanthropy in a way John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie never could have imagined. Because the knowledge is there, because more and more of us are working really hard to get them to you, and because we have technology that can help us share it among ourselves and around the world. Now, the very first thing that the Center for High Impact Philanthropy ever released was a report called I'm Not Rockefeller. And that was an actual quote from a donor that I spoke to, because when she heard the word high-impact philanthropy, this was the image that came to mind. But today, if we choose, we have a chance to remake the image of a high-impact philanthropist. From this to this. Thank you.